He stood silently as the entire classroom turned their eyes toward him. His shoes were old, torn, and barely holding together. The principal, stern and loud, pointed at them and said, "This school has a standard, and you clearly don't belong." Laughter echoed from the students as the boy lowered his head in shame. He was suspended that day for violating the dress code. But what no one knew was that those shoes weren't just worn out. They were handmade. He had designed them himself using scraps from the streets, stitching each piece with care. It was a tribute to his late father, a shoe repairman who once told him, "If you can dream it, you can build it." Days before the suspension, he had submitted his handmade design to a global sneaker competition, never expecting to hear back. But just 3 days later, his life changed. A black SUV pulled up to his tiny home. A man stepped out, the CEO of one of the world's biggest shoe brands. "We saw your design," he said. "You're a genius." The boy was flown out, offered a scholarship, and invited to join their youth innovation program. His design? It became a sensation. Athletes wore it. Kids lined up for it. The same shoes that once caused him humiliation were now making headlines. The school's reputation took a hit, and the principal faced public backlash and eventual demotion. Meanwhile, the boy rose, not with anger, but with grace. He proved that talent doesn't wear labels, and worth isn't measured by wealth. His journey became a message for millions. Never judge someone by how they look, because the one you laugh at today might be the one the world honors tomorrow. He had always walked into school quietly, unnoticed, trying his best to blend into the background. His name was Jamal, a soft-spoken boy with big dreams and worn-out shoes. At 15, life had already taught him to expect very little, especially from people. Raised by a single mother in a small, rundown neighborhood, Jamal never complained. Every day he wore the same clothes, carried the same faded backpack, and walked in the same tattered shoes. The soles were thin, the stitching frayed, and the laces mismatched. But he loved them, not because they were stylish, but because he had made them himself. What others saw as broken and ugly, Jamal saw as personal and powerful. Those shoes were born from memories, long nights sketching designs, watching videos about shoe mechanics, learning to sew using a borrowed needle, and cutting fabric from discarded materials he found around town. They were the last project he and his father had dreamed of before cancer took him away. That Monday morning felt different, though. Jamal had a strange sense that something was about to happen, but nothing could have prepared him for the humiliation that followed. During morning assembly, the principal, Mr. Green, noticed his shoes. He interrupted the announcements and asked Jamal to step forward. Confused and embarrassed, Jamal hesitated. "Come here now," the principal barked. As Jamal stood before the entire student body, Mr. Green grabbed the microphone and said, This is not acceptable. This school has standards, and wearing shoes like that, shoes that look like trash, means you don't belong here." The crowd gasped. Then a wave of laughter erupted. Some students pointed, others pulled out their phones to record. Jamal stood frozen. His hands trembled and his ears rang. He wanted to disappear. "You are suspended for 1 week. Fix your appearance or don't bother coming back," Mr. Green concluded coldly. That moment would be seared into Jamal's memory forever. He walked home that day with his head down, his shoulders heavy with shame. But it wasn't the suspension that hurt. It was the way they made him feel. Like he was worthless. Like his shoes, and by extension, he, were a joke. No one knew what those shoes meant. No one cared to ask. He didn't even cry when he got home. Instead, he pulled out his sketchbook and started drawing again. It was the only thing that made him feel alive. What no one realized was that just a week before, Jamal had nervously submitted a photo of those very shoes to an international design contest for young creators. He had come across it on a school library computer while working on a project. It seemed too big for someone like him, global, elite, judged by top designers, but something inside him said, try. So, he did. He took photos of the shoes in his backyard, wrote a heartfelt story about his father's legacy, and hit submit. Then he forgot about it, believing nothing would come of it. 3 days after his suspension, as he sat quietly sketching, in the corner of his small bedroom, a black SUV pulled up outside his house. His mother answered the knock at the door, confused to see 2 well-dressed people with badges from Rogue Kicks, one of the most innovative sneaker companies in the world. "Is this the home of Jamal Taylor?" they asked. Jamal stepped forward cautiously. "We saw your entry," the woman said, smiling. "Not only were you selected, you were the highest-rated submission in the contest's history. Our CEO wants to meet you personally." Within 2 days, Jamal was on his first airplane, flying to Rogue Kicks headquarters in Oregon. He was treated like a rising star. Designers from all over the world gathered to see his hand-stitched sneakers. They couldn't believe the detail, the structure, the originality. "You made this from scratch?" one of the engineers asked, stunned. "You've got something we can't teach, vision." They offered him a full scholarship to their Youth Design Academy, mentorship under their top creatives, and even launched a limited edition of his shoe under the name JT Originals. Back home, the story went viral. News stations picked it up. Teen suspended for tattered shoes becomes sneaker industry's youngest star. Social media exploded with support. Hashtags like Chalk Respect Jamal and a From Tattered to Triumph began trending. Students who once laughed at him now reposted his story with messages like, "Knew he was special." But the internet never forgets. And the video of his public humiliation by the principal resurfaced quickly. The school district launched an investigation into the incident. Mr. Green, under immense pressure and facing public outrage, was removed from his position. Parents demanded change, calling for a new code of conduct rooted in compassion, not judgment. As for Jamal, he returned to his old neighborhood not with a chip on his shoulder, but with inspiration. He visited his old school not to boast, but to talk to the students. He wore a fresh pair of his signature shoes and spoke with clarity. What people laugh at today might be the future they can't even imagine. Don't let their voices drown out your own. The same assembly hall that once echoed with laughter and mockery now filled with standing applause. He went on to design more shoes, but he never forgot his roots. Every new design carried a piece of his story, a stitch from struggle, a color from hope, a soul built on purpose. He started a foundation to teach kids how to design, build, and believe in their ideas. "You don't need money to be creative," he often said. "You just need courage." Jamal's journey reminded the world of something powerful. Greatness doesn't always come wrapped in shine. Sometimes it walks quietly in worn-out shoes, waiting for someone, anyone, to believe in it. He had been judged, mocked, and thrown aside. But his truth was louder than their ridicule, his vision sharper than their doubt. And in the end, the very shoes they laughed at became the shoes that walked him into greatness. Jamal never expected the world to be kind to him. From the time he was a young boy, life had dealt him challenges that most kids his age couldn't imagine. Raised by a single mother in a struggling neighborhood, he learned early on to survive, without asking for much. His clothes were second-hand, his meals often stretched thin, and his dreams felt bigger than the small apartment he lived in. But the one thing that gave Jamal joy was designing shoes. It wasn't something he saw on TV or picked up from social media. It was something passed down to him by his late father, who used to work in a shoe repair shop. Before he passed away from a sudden illness, Jamal's father would sketch shoe designs with him, explaining the curves, the lines, the balance of form and function. "Shoes," his father once said, "are more than what you wear. They're how you show the world where you're going." That memory never left Jamal. Years passed, and Jamal, now 15, clung to that passion. He couldn't afford brand-name sneakers like the other kids at school, so he started making his own. He collected scraps, pieces of old jeans, rubber, from discarded tires, thread from his mother's sewing kit, and slowly began building his own shoes by hand. They weren't perfect, but they were his. Every stitch told a story, every seam carried a memory. He wore them with pride, even if others didn't understand. In fact, most people didn't. His classmates teased him, calling them trash shoes, and teachers looked the other way. But Jamal stayed quiet, focused on his craft, believing that someday someone would see what he saw. That belief was put to the test on a cold Monday morning. As he walked into the school hallway, the sound of his homemade shoes squeaking slightly on the tile floor, the principal caught sight of them. Mr. Green, a man known more for his strict rules than his compassion, narrowed his eyes and called Jamal out in front of the entire school assembly. "Young man, step forward," he said sternly, pointing. Confused and nervous, Jamal obeyed. As he stood there, the principal grabbed the microphone and spoke loudly. "Look at these shoes. What kind of student walks into a respectable school wearing this?" The room went silent. Then came the laughter, the mockery. Some students took out their phones, recording the moment. Mr. Green didn't stop there. "You are suspended for 1 week. Fix your appearance or don't bother coming back," he said coldly. Jamal didn't argue. He just lowered his head and walked home. He said nothing to his mother when he entered the apartment. She had enough to worry about. Instead, he went to his room, sat on the floor, and pulled out his sketchbook. He looked at the designs he'd been working on for months, and for the first time, he felt doubt creep in. Maybe they were right. Maybe his dreams were foolish. But then he remembered something. A few days earlier, he had submitted one of his shoe designs to an international sneaker design competition. It was a long shot. He had stumbled upon it while using a public computer at the local library. The form asked for photos, a backstory, and a brief description of the inspiration behind the design. Jamal took photos of his shoes in the alley. Behind his building, wrote about his father's influence, and submitted everything with a shaky hand and a racing heart. Then he forgot about it, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't expect anything to come from it. 3 days after his suspension, something strange happened. A sleek black SUV pulled up outside his building. Jamal, sitting by the window sketching as usual, watched curiously as 2 professionally dressed individuals stepped out and knocked on his door. His mother opened it, wary at first, but softened as they introduced themselves as representatives from Rogue Kicks, one of the biggest names in the global sneaker industry. "We're looking for Jamal Taylor," one of them said with a warm smile. "We received his entry in our competition. We need to speak with him." Jamal slowly stepped forward, unsure if this was real. "We don't usually do this," the man continued, "but your design, your story, it blew us away. Our CEO wants to meet you personally." Before he could even process what was happening, Jamal found himself on a flight to Oregon, headed to Rogue Kicks' global headquarters. For the first time in his life, someone had seen his work and called it brilliant. At the company's main office, he was welcomed with open arms. Dozens of designers, engineers, and creatives gathered to meet him. They marveled at the homemade shoes he brought along. They asked questions about the materials, the design, the stitching pattern, and Jamal answered each one with clarity, passion, and depth far beyond his age. The CEO, a tall woman named Veronica Chase, pulled him aside and said, "You have something you can't teach: vision, heart, originality. We want to offer you a full scholarship to our youth designer program, mentorship from our top team, and we want to release your design under a special collection called JT Originals." Jamal was speechless. Everything he had ever dreamed of was unfolding in front of him. And while he was still overwhelmed, one part of him remained grounded: the shoes. They weren't just a product. They were a symbol of pain, of perseverance, of purpose. As news of Jamal's story spread, it quickly went viral. Articles popped up with headlines like, "Boy suspended for homemade shoes gets shoe deal from global brand," and "From trash to triumph, teen designer shocks the sneaker world." Social media exploded with love and outrage. Love for Jamal's journey and outrage at the way he was treated by his school. Videos of the assembly where he had been humiliated resurfaced, sparking national debate about dignity, discrimination, and the real meaning of education. Under immense pressure, the school district launched an investigation. Mr. Green, the principal, faced backlash from the community, parents, and even faculty. Within weeks, he was removed from his position, and the school was forced to revise its policies on student appearance, introducing language that emphasized empathy and self-expression. Jamal's name was not just on sneaker boxes. It was on petitions, in classrooms, in conversations around the country. Despite all the fame and recognition, Jamal remained humble. He returned to his old neighborhood and started a small weekend program teaching kids how to design their own shoes using simple materials. "You don't need money to be creative," he told them. "You just need a reason." His message wasn't about revenge. It was about rising. He gave talks at schools, stood on stages he never imagined, and used every opportunity to remind people that greatness doesn't wear a label. It can be stitched into silence, hidden in struggle, and born from heartbreak. In time, JT Originals became one of the most popular youth collections in the world. Pro athletes wore them, celebrities praised them. But for Jamal, the real success wasn't in sales or followers. It was in the moment he saw a young boy walking confidently in a pair of shoes, just like the ones he had been mocked for. The circle had completed. His pain had found its purpose. Jamal's story was no longer just his own. It belonged to every kid who had ever been told they weren't enough. It belonged to every dreamer who had ever been laughed at. And it stood as proof that sometimes the very thing they mock you for is what the world needs most. Jamal Thompson was a quiet, humble boy with a heart full of dreams and a mind bursting with creativity. Living in a small, underserved neighborhood with his single mother, he never had the privileges other kids at his school enjoyed. No fancy gadgets, no brand-name clothes, and certainly no trendy sneakers. But Jamal didn't let that define him. From a very young age, he had a passion for design, specifically shoes. His late father had once been a cobbler, working long hours in a modest repair shop, crafting, sewing, and patching up worn-out shoes for the community. Jamal would sit by his side, watching how his father's hands moved with care and precision, turning something broken into something useful again. After his father passed away, Jamal kept the memory alive through sketches, pages upon pages of shoe designs he created with nothing more than a pencil and his imagination. He didn't have access to the best materials, so he scavenged old fabric, worn-out rubber soles, scraps of denim, and plastic pieces. Slowly, he began to build shoes with his own two hands. Rough around the edges, yes, but full of soul and originality. By the time he was in high school, Jamal had made a few pairs. For himself, wearing them proudly despite the mockery. His classmates teased him relentlessly. "What are those?" they'd yell in the hallway, pointing at his tattered sneakers. They laughed, filmed him secretly, and shared the videos online. Even teachers ignored the cruelty. But Jamal remained, focused, never reacting with anger or shame. Deep inside, he believed his shoes were special. Every seam told a story. Every sole held a memory. He didn't see junk. He saw potential. But that belief would be harshly tested one morning. It was a typical Monday when the school principal, Mr. Green, an older man known for his obsession with appearances and strict discipline, noticed Jamal's shoes during the morning assembly. With a cold stare and a raised voice, he called Jamal to the front. In front of hundreds of students, he pointed to Jamal's handmade sneakers and mocked him publicly. "This is unacceptable," he barked. "This school has standards. We are not a charity house. You're suspended for a week. Don't come back until you've learned how to dress properly." The room filled with awkward silence. Some students gasped, others snickered, and Jamal, humiliated and heartbroken, turned and walked out quietly. That night, Jamal didn't speak much. His mother was confused and worried, but Jamal didn't want to trouble her more. He just sat by the window, sketching silently. But one thing kept him going. A few weeks earlier, he had entered a shoe design competition held by one of the biggest athletic brands in the world, Elevate Footwear. The entry was a long shot. He had found it online at the public library, took photos of his handmade shoes using an old phone, wrote a heartfelt essay about his journey, and submitted it. He hadn't told anyone. He didn't expect anything. It was just hope, a distant dream to hold on to. Days passed after his suspension, and he buried himself in his sketch pad, trying to silence the shame he felt. Until, on the third day, something unexpected happened. A sleek black SUV pulled up in front of their apartment. Two people in tailored suits knocked at the door. Jamal's mother answered, confused, while Jamal stood behind her nervously. "Good afternoon," one of them said, kindly. "We're from Elevate Footwear. We're looking for Jamal Thompson." Jamal's heart nearly stopped. "We saw his competition entry," the other added, "and we've never seen anything like it. Our CEO would like to meet him personally." Within hours, Jamal was being flown out to the company's global headquarters. It was his first time on a plane, his first time seeing a big city, and his first time stepping into a place where his dreams felt real. At Elevate's campus, executives, designers, and marketing heads gathered to greet him. They had his shoes displayed on a table under lights, treating them like art. They asked him questions, genuinely curious about his ideas, his story, his methods. The CEO, a powerful and respected woman named Ava Marquez, sat with him one-on-one. "Jamal," she said with admiration, "you are more than talented. You are a genius. You've done with scraps what professionals struggle to do with million-dollar tools." She offered him a full scholarship to a youth design program, access to world-class mentors, and, most shocking of all, a collaboration deal. His very own sneaker line, JT Originals, would be launched as part of Elevate's global campaign to empower young creators from underserved communities. Jamal sat in stunned silence, overwhelmed by how his entire life had changed in just a few days. Back home, the news spread like wildfire. Headlines read, "Boy suspended for tattered shoes, gets design deal from top sneaker brand." The video of the principal shaming Jamal resurfaced and went viral. Celebrities, athletes, and influencers posted messages of support for Jamal and outrage at the school. "This boy is the future," one tweet read. "Shame on the system that tried to break him." Parents in the community demanded answers. Students protested. The school board was forced to act. Mr. Green was swiftly demoted and later removed. Entirely, his cold treatment of students publicly condemned. Meanwhile, the school issued an apology to Jamal and updated its appearance policy, stating that creativity and self-expression shall be protected and celebrated. But Jamal wasn't interested in revenge or headlines. He stayed grounded, always remembering where he came from. He returned to his neighborhood and started a weekend workshop in the local community center, teaching kids how to sketch and build their own shoes using recycled materials. "You don't need money to create," he told them. "You need purpose." His story began appearing in textbooks, documentaries, and motivational videos. He gave speeches at schools across the country. What inspired people wasn't just his design talent. It was his patience, his strength in silence, his refusal to be defined by others' ignorance. JT Originals became a best-selling youth sneaker line. It wasn't about luxury. It was about story. Kids wore them proudly, knowing what they represented: resilience, vision, and the ability to rise above cruelty. Jamal's life transformed, but his spirit didn't. Every time he laced up a new pair, he thought of that moment on stage, the humiliation, and how close he was to giving up. And then he smiled, knowing he didn't. His story wasn't just about shoes. It was about finding gold where others saw garbage, about showing the world that sometimes the person they laugh at today is the one who builds tomorrow. And as Jamal looked ahead, walking confidently into a future he once only imagined, he whispered the same words his father once told him long ago. Shoes don't just carry your feet, they carry your dreams. Jamal Thompson's story is one of resilience, creativity, and ultimate vindication, an inspiring journey that begins with hardship but ends in triumph, forever changing the way people see not only him but the power of vision and determination. Growing up in a low-income neighborhood, Jamal was no stranger to challenges. His family struggled to make ends meet, and the luxury of new, stylish shoes was simply out of reach. Instead, Jamal found solace in something extraordinary: designing and creating his own shoes. Drawing inspiration from his late father, a humble cobbler who had taught him that even the most worn-out shoe could be given new life, Jamal began crafting shoes from recycled materials: old fabrics, scraps of rubber, and bits of discarded plastic. His creations were rough, patched, and sometimes looked worn themselves, but they carried a story, a heartbeat, and above all, originality. At school, however, Jamal's unique shoes became a source of ridicule. Teachers, peers, and even the principal failed to see the art and effort behind his creations. One day, the principal publicly shamed Jamal for wearing tattered homemade shoes and suspended him, declaring that such footwear did not meet the school's standards. The humiliation was crushing, yet Jamal never lost faith in his designs or in himself. Deep down, he believed that his shoes were more than just patched-up footwear. They were a symbol of creativity, resilience, and hope. Unbeknownst to many, Jamal had quietly entered a prestigious shoe design competition hosted by Elevate Footwear, one of the world's leading sports brands. His entry showcased not only his craftsmanship, but his innovative vision: shoes that told a story and were built sustainably with love and care. Against all odds, Jamal's work caught the eye of the company's CEO, Eva Marquez, who immediately recognized his talent. Elevate Footwear reached out to Jamal with an offer that would change his life: a chance to design an official shoe line, access to professional mentorship, and the resources he had long dreamed of, but never had. As news of Jamal's success spread, the tables turned dramatically. The same school that had suspended him was now under scrutiny. Public outrage grew over the principal's treatment of Jamal, and the story went viral, with athletes, celebrities, and communities rallying behind the young designer. The principal was eventually removed from his position, and the school revised its policies to embrace individuality and creativity. Meanwhile, Jamal's shoe line, named JT Originals, became a sensation. The shoes, once mocked as tattered and unworthy, were now worn by professional athletes across the globe, featured in magazines and adored by kids who lined up for hours just to get a pair. His designs combined cutting-edge technology with his signature recycled materials, symbolizing not only style but sustainability and empowerment. Jamal never forgot his roots. He used his growing platform to give back to the community that shaped him, hosting workshops and mentoring young designers from underserved neighborhoods. He wanted to show them that creativity could thrive anywhere, regardless of circumstances. His story became a beacon of hope and a powerful lesson. True talent can't be hidden forever, and sometimes what society dismisses as broken or unworthy holds the greatest potential for greatness. Today, Jamal Thompson is not just a designer. He is a symbol of perseverance, innovation, and respect. His journey reminds us all that judging someone by their appearance or their struggles is not only unfair, it can blind us to the genius within. The boy who was suspended for wearing tattered shoes is now celebrated worldwide, and his creations continue to inspire millions, proving that respect and success come not from conforming, but from embracing one's true self and daring to dream. Jamal Thompson's story is one of quiet strength, relentless creativity, and a powerful lesson about the dangers of judgment and the redemptive power of perseverance. Growing up in a modest neighborhood, Jamal did not have the luxuries many kids took for granted. His family lived on a tight budget, and simple things like a new pair of shoes were often out of reach. But Jamal had something special. A mind that saw beyond limitations and a heart that refused to be defined by circumstance. Inspired by his late father, who was a shoemaker in their community, Jamal began designing and crafting his own shoes from scraps and recycled materials. What others saw as worn-out fabric or broken soles, Jamal saw as raw potential. Each shoe he created was unique, a blend of resourcefulness and passion, stitched together with love and a dream to one day make it big in the world of design. At school, however, Jamal's creativity was misunderstood. The worn and patched shoes he proudly wore became a target for ridicule. Peers mocked him, teachers looked the other way, and worst of all, the school's principal, Mr. Green, took a harsh stance against what he called inappropriate footwear. One day, in front of the entire school assembly, the principal singled out Jamal, publicly humiliating him and suspending him for wearing tattered shoes that did not meet the school's strict dress code. The announcement was a blow that crushed Jamal's spirit, but did not extinguish his passion. Silently, he endured the shame, the laughter, and the whispers, all the while continuing to sketch, build, and dream. Despite the principal's words and actions, Jamal held on to a secret hope. He had recently entered a prestigious design competition with Elevate Footwear, a leading global shoe company, submitting photos and designs of his handmade shoes. After days of silence, Jamal's life took a dramatic turn. Representatives from Elevate Footwear arrived unexpectedly at his home, impressed by the originality and soul in his work. The company's CEO, Ava Marquez, personally invited him to their headquarters. There, Jamal was welcomed not as a charity case, but as a prodigy. His shoes, once mocked, were now displayed as masterpieces. Ava praised Jamal's innovation and heart, offering him mentorship, scholarships, and a collaboration deal to launch his own sneaker line under Elevate's brand. News of his success spread quickly, sparking widespread support and outrage over the school's treatment of Jamal. Social media amplified the story, celebrities and athletes publicly endorsed Jamal's talent, and the school's administration faced scrutiny. Mr. Green was removed, and the school revised its policies to embrace creativity and individuality rather than punish it. Jamal's journey from humiliation to recognition became a powerful narrative about resilience and respect. He returned to his community, using his newfound platform to inspire other young creators, teaching them that true worth lies in passion and perseverance, not appearances. His sneaker line, JT Originals, became a symbol of innovation rooted in humble beginnings and a celebration of creativity born from adversity. The boy who was once suspended for tattered shoes became a celebrated designer, proving that genius often comes wrapped in unexpected packages. Jamal's story reminds us all, never judge someone by how they look, because the one you humiliate today might be the genius the world celebrates tomorrow.